The world of organized crime is filled with stories of betrayal, violence, and untimely deaths, most often at the hands of human rivals, law enforcement, or the consequences of a life lived on the edge. Yet, in the tale of Vince Moretti, a feared gangster from Brooklyn, New York death came not from a gunshot, a knife, or a criminal underworld dispute, but from a much less predictable source, a massive brown bear in the wilds of Alaska. This is the extraordinary and tragic story of a man who had made his living in the shadow of violence, only to meet his end in the remote forests of the North. If you're fascinated by these wild giants and want to learn more about grizzly behavior, survival tactics, and real-life encounters, be sure to subscribe to our channel for thrilling stories and expert advice. Vince Moretti was a man who had done unspeakable things in his rise through the Gambino crime family. His name was synonymous with fear in the streets of Brooklyn. Yet, despite the danger of his criminal life, he sought refuge in the wilderness, believing that nature could offer him the peace and anonymity he longed for. Unfortunately, this belief would prove fatal. The events leading to Vince's death highlight the unpredictability of both human nature and the natural world. In this essay, we will explore the rise of Vince Moretti within the world of organized crime, his decision to flee to Alaska, and the shocking way in which his life was cut short by the very wilderness he sought to escape. Vince Moretti was born in the heart of Brooklyn, New York, on February 19, 1965. Brooklyn, during the 1970s and 1980s, was a place where crime and corruption were woven into the fabric of everyday life. Moretti was no stranger to this environment. Raised in a neighborhood where the mafia was a constant presence, Vince quickly became familiar with the rules of the street. His family, like many in his community, had ties to the mob, and by his early 20s, Vince had already found his way into the ranks of the Gambino crime family. The Gambino family, one of the most powerful mafia organizations in the United States, had a reputation for ruthlessness. Vince, with his sharp mind and violent temper, fit right in. He earned the respect of his peers and superiors through his willingness to do whatever it took to achieve his goals, no matter how brutal. He became known for carrying out hit jobs, collecting debts, and overseeing illicit operations with an iron fist. He thrived in the criminal underworld, developing a reputation as someone who could be counted on to handle difficult situations with the utmost efficiency. However, as Moretti's power within the organization grew, so did the challenges he faced. The Gambino family, like all criminal organizations, was rife with power struggles, and by the mid-1990s, Vince found himself caught in the middle of a growing feud between factions. Though he had proven his loyalty to the family, Vince's ambition and desire for more power began to alienate some of his fellow mobsters. He knew that in the dangerous world of organized crime, one's position was never secure for long. But it was during this turbulent period that Vince began to seriously consider the idea of leaving the life behind. In 1998, after years of growing tensions within the Gambino family, Moretti decided to make a drastic change. He had grown tired of the constant paranoia, the risk of betrayal, and the ever-present danger of violent retribution. He began planning an escape from New York, a city that had long been his home and prison. His plan was to disappear, to sever ties with the life he had known, and start over somewhere where no one would be able to find him. After much deliberation, Vince settled on Alaska as his new home. Alaska, with its vast wilderness, isolation, and harsh conditions, seemed like the perfect place to escape from his past. It was a land where anonymity could be maintained, and where the demands of organized crime were a distant concern. Vince purchased a remote cabin near the town of Fairbanks, miles away from the nearest city or road. The location was ideal for someone looking to vanish. In the middle of Alaska's wilderness, Vince could live out his days in peace, away from the prying eyes of his old associates. Vince had always been fascinated by the rugged beauty of Alaska. As a child, he had read about the state's vast forests, towering mountains, and diverse wildlife, and the idea of living among it all had always appealed to him. He had even considered himself a bit of an outdoorsman, having spent some time hunting and fishing in his youth. Though he was no expert, Vince believed that he could adapt to the wilderness. He imagined a quiet life spent fishing in the streams, hunting in the forests, and enjoying the solitude that Alaska's remote landscape offered. At first, Vince's new life seemed to be everything he had hoped for. He settled into his cabin, learned to navigate the harsh terrain, and even found peace in the simplicity of life. The isolation, which might have seemed daunting to others, was exactly what Vince needed. It gave him the space to distance himself from the ghosts of his past and focus on his future. He felt free for the first time in years. But even in Alaska, the specter of Vince's criminal past lingered. Although he had hoped to leave behind the world of organized crime, the isolation only deepened his sense of paranoia. He began to believe that the Gambino family was hunting him down, that his old enemies would eventually find him in the wilderness. This constant fear of retribution began to gnaw at him, though he never spoke of it to anyone. In the stillness of the Alaskan forests, the shadows of Vince's past seemed to follow him. On the evening of October 5th, 1998, Vince decided to go on a solo hunting trip. The days were getting shorter, and the temperature was dropping as winter approached. It was the perfect time for hunting, and Vince had become accustomed to the rhythms of the Alaskan wilderness. He packed his rifle, a few supplies, and set off into the woods, hoping to bag some game before the cold weather fully set in. He wasn't hunting for food; his cabin was stocked with provisions, but rather for the quiet enjoyment of the activity itself. As he ventured deeper into the forest, Vince began to notice signs of bear activity. There were fresh tracks, broken branches, and the unmistakable scent of a bear's presence in the area. Alaska is home to both black bears and brown bears, with brown bears being especially dangerous due to their size and strength. Despite knowing the risks, Vince was not particularly worried. He had read about bears in the region and had heard numerous stories from locals about encounters, but he felt confident in his ability to handle any situation. Vince continued on, assuming that he could avoid any potential encounters with bears. However, as dusk fell and the light began to fade, he found himself in close proximity to a massive brown bear. The bear, a lone male grizzly, was foraging near a berry patch, seemingly unaware of Vince's presence. At this point, Vince's experience and instincts should have kicked in. He should have backed away quietly, slowly retreating from the bear's territory. But in his anxious state and with the growing dark, Vince made a crucial mistake. He stepped on a twig, which snapped loudly in the quiet evening air. The bear immediately turned its head and locked eyes with Vince. The two were only a few dozen yards apart, and the bear, now aware of the human presence, began to approach. Vince, in his panic, tried to retreat, but the bear was too fast. In the chaos of the moment, Vince fired his rifle. However, his shot went wide. The bear charged. The grizzly hit Vince with the force of a freight train, knocking him to the ground. Vince, who had spent years fighting and surviving in the streets of Brooklyn, found himself utterly powerless in the face of this natural predator. The bear swiped at him with its massive claws, tearing through his clothes and flesh. Vince tried to scramble to his feet, but the bear was relentless. It attacked him with a ferocity that was both terrifying and swift. Vince's last moments were spent trying to fight back, but his efforts were futile. The bear's massive paws raked through him, leaving deep gashes. He attempted to use his rifle as a weapon, but it was knocked out of his hands in the struggle. The bear continued its assault, and within minutes, Vince was dead. His body, severely mauled, was left behind in the woods. Vince's disappearance was noticed the next day when he failed to return to his cabin. A few of the locals, as well as some individuals who had known Vince from his past, began a search for him. They followed his tracks deep into the woods, hoping to find him alive, but what they found was far worse than they could have imagined. The search party found Vince's body near the site of the bear attack. His rifle, discarded on the ground, lay next to him. The bear had likely retreated after the attack, as grizzlies tend to avoid humans once they have asserted their dominance. Wildlife officials later confirmed that the bear was a lone male that had likely become aggressive due to food scarcity as winter approached. The news of Vince Moretti's death spread quickly, shocking those who knew him. For a man who had survived countless violent encounters in his criminal life, to be taken by a bear seemed almost absurd. But it was a grim reminder that nature operates on its own terms, and even the most hardened criminals are not immune to its unpredictable dangers. The story of Vince Moretti's tragic end offers several valuable lessons. First and foremost, it serves a reminder of the unpredictability of nature. No matter how tough or prepared someone might think they are, there is always the potential for nature to throw the unexpected. In Vince's case, his criminal past may have made him feel invincible, but in the wild, he was just another human being at the mercy of a far stronger force. Secondly, Vince's death highlights the importance of respecting wildlife. Bears, especially grizzlies, are formidable creatures that should be treated with caution and respect. While Vince may have been accustomed to navigating dangerous situations in the criminal world, he was unprepared for the raw power of a bear in its own habitat. Finally, the tragic fate of Vince Moretti teaches us the value of preparation and awareness in the wilderness. So those who venture into bear country must be equipped with the proper tools and knowledge to avoid potentially fatal encounters. Carrying bear spray, making noise to avoid surprising bears, and knowing how to respond in the event of an attack are all crucial steps for survival. In conclusion, Vince Moretti's life, filled with violence, betrayal, and survival, ended in a way that no one could have predicted. His death at the claws of a bear stands as a stark reminder that nature's dangers are as real and unpredictable as any human threat. Whether one is a gangster or an average person, respect for nature and its creatures is vital. For those who venture into bear country, the lesson is clear: be prepared, be aware, and always respect the wilderness. It is a force far greater than any criminal, no matter how powerful. This essay tells a compelling and unexpected story that weaves together the harsh world of organized crime with the unforgiving wilderness. I hope this expanded version meets your expectations. Let me know if you'd like to add or adjust anything further. Story 2? For most people, the idea of a boxer as someone who thrives in the ring, deflecting blows with skill, speed, and strength would not seem to be the type of person who could be defeated by anything other than another human opponent. However, as the tragic story of professional boxer Tommy Hernandez reminds us, there are forces in nature far stronger than any human adversary. Tommy's life came to a tragic and unexpected end, not through a knockout in the boxing ring, but through a brutal encounter with a bear while he was on a remote camping trip in Montana in 2012. Thomas Hernandez, known for his impressive rise through the boxing ranks in the late 2000s, had established himself as one of the most promising boxers of his generation. So his combination of speed, power, and technical prowess made him a household name in the world of professional boxing. However, despite his fame and success in the ring, Tommy was no stranger to danger. Having grown up in a rough neighborhood and worked his way out of poverty, he was accustomed to adversity. But no amount of training, grit, or courage could prepare him for the brutal reality of nature, where even the strongest of men can be brought down by the sheer force of an animal in its own territory. So this essay will explore the rise of Tommy Hernandez as a boxer, his decision to seek solace in nature, and the tragic events that led to his untimely death. We will also examine the lessons that can be learned from this shocking event and offer advice on how to stay safe in the wilderness, where unpredictable dangers await. Tommy Hernandez was born on January 15, 1984 in East Los Angeles, California. Growing up in a neighborhood plagued by gang violence and economic hardship, Tommy learned early on that survival was a daily battle. So his family, though close-knit, was often struggling to make ends meet. Boxing became his outlet, or way to channel the frustrations and anger that built up in his youth. By the age of 15, he had already begun training at a local gym, showing natural talent that his coaches immediately recognized. Tommy's style in the ring was a blend of finesse and raw power. He was quick on his feet and could deliver punches with both speed and devastating force. By the time he turned 21, he had made his professional debut and quickly rose through the ranks. His first major title came in 2008 when he won the WA Intercontinental Middleweight Championship, defeating the reigning champion in a stunning match that solidified his reputation as one of boxing's brightest rising stars. Over the next few years, Tommy's career soared. He took on opponents from around the world, accumulating victories and increasing his profile. His sharp punches and quick reflexes allowed him to outclass many of his rivals, and by 2011, he was a top contender for the WWH Welterweight Championship. Despite the growing pressures of fame and the boxing world's brutal expectations, Tommy remained grounded. He often spoke about the importance of staying humble and never forgetting where he came from. However, the relentless pace of boxing and the constant pressure to perform began to take a toll on Tommy both physically and mentally. He started feeling the weight of his career and the sacrifices it demanded, leaving him yearning for something more than the lights of the ring. To find peace and clarity, Tommy sought out the quiet of nature, hoping that time spent away from the world of boxing would give him the reset he needed. In the summer of 2012, after a particularly grueling series of bouts, he had already experienced a few injuries that required healing, and he felt the need for a complete break from the limelight. He rented a cabin in the remote wilderness of Montana, far from the distractions of city life and the ever-present cameras. But the region was known for its pristine landscapes, vast forests, and abundant wildlife, an ideal place for someone looking to disconnect. Tommy, an avid outdoorsman, had always found solace in nature. As a child, he had spent weekends camping and hiking with his family, which had fostered a love for the outdoors that lasted into adulthood. While he wasn't an expert in wilderness survival, he was comfortable in nature and had experience hiking and camping in other parts of the country. However, the wilderness of Montana was different. It was home to one of the most formidable predators in North America, the grizzly bear. Tommy spent his days hiking through the dense forests, enjoying the peaceful solitude. He reveled in the sound of birds, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and the overwhelming sense of tranquility that seemed to wash over him with every step. For a man who had spent years in the brutal spotlight of boxing, this was the escape he needed. But as with any wilderness, there were risks. Despite his love for the outdoors, Tommy was unaware of the real dangers that lurked in the forest, the presence of bears, which were known to roam the area in search of food. Over the course of his stay, Tommy grew increasingly comfortable with his surroundings. He set up camp near a creek, enjoying the quiet and the simplicity of life in the wild. His nights were spent around the campfire, reflecting on his career and the choices that had brought him to this point. He had not planned on returning to boxing anytime soon, feeling that the pressure to fight again was overwhelming. The more time he spent in nature, the more he realized that perhaps this was where he belonged. On the morning of August 16th, 2012, Tommy decided to go for an early hike in the nearby hills. The sun was just rising, casting a golden hue over the trees and the quiet wilderness. Tommy packed a light breakfast and set out, enjoying the cool mountain air. He didn't know it yet, but this would be the last hike of his life. He made his way up a narrow trail. Tommy unknowingly wandered into the territory of a large male grizzly bear. The bear, which had been foraging for food, likely sensed Tommy's presence before the boxer saw it. Grizzly bears are known for being territorial, especially in the late summer and early fall, when they are preparing for hibernation and scavenging for as much food as possible. Tommy, unaware of the danger, continued along the trail. It wasn't until he heard a rustling in the bushes that he realized something was wrong. The bear, startled by the sound of movement, emerged from the dense undergrowth, its massive form looming in front of Tommy. The encounter happened so quickly that Tommy had little time to react. Bears typically avoid human contact, but when surprised or threatened, they can become aggressive, especially when they feel cornered or their territory is encroached upon. In this case, the bear likely saw Tommy as a threat to its food source or its space. It charged at him with terrifying speed, knocking him to the ground before he could even reach for his bear spray, which he had forgotten to bring with him on his hike. Tommy's training as a boxer kicked in as he instinctively tried to defend himself, throwing punches at the bear in a futile attempt to ward it off. But a bear's sheer strength and size are far beyond that of any human, even one as powerful as Tommy. The bear swiped at him with its massive claws, causing severe injuries to his chest and face. Tommy tried to scramble to his feet, but the bear was relentless, pinning him to the ground with its weight. The attack was brutal and swift. Tommy, despite his strength and skill in the ring, was utterly powerless in the face of this wild predator. The bear continued its assault, eventually killing him with a combination of bites and crushing blows. Afterward, the bear retreated, as grizzlies often do after asserting their dominance, leaving Tommy's body behind. It wasn't until the following day that Tommy's absence was noticed. The local authorities were alerted to his disappearance, and a search was launched. After hours of searching, a team of rangers and local guides discovered his body, mauled beyond recognition, in the area where he had last been seen. The bear, which was later identified as a male grizzly, had likely been in the area foraging for food and had not been provoked by Tommy until their unfortunate encounter. Tommy's death shocked the boxing world as well as the local community. He was remembered not only for his athleticism and success in the ring, but also for his humble nature and the personal growth he had undergone during his time away from the sport. His tragic death served as a sobering reminder that nature is far less predictable than any human adversary. The death of Tommy Hernandez is an unfortunate, tragic reminder that no matter how skilled, tough, or experienced a person may be, there are some dangers in life that simply cannot be prepared for. The encounter with the bear highlights the vulnerability of humans in the wild, especially when it comes to dangerous animals like grizzly bears. The most important lesson from Tommy's death is the necessity of preparedness when venturing into wildlife territory. For those who wish to hike or camp in areas where bears live, it is crucial to carry bear spray, make noise to avoid surprising bears, and be aware of the signs of bear activity in the area. Additionally, it is always wise to let someone know your itinerary and never venture too far into the wilderness without adequate supplies and knowledge of the risks. Though Tommy Hernandez's life was tragically cut short, his story serves a poignant reminder to respect the wild and its creatures, and to always be prepared when encountering the forces of nature. Whether in the boxing ring or the wilderness, the unpredictability of life is something that we must always acknowledge and prepare for. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get our latest videos on outdoor safety and wildlife. Stay safe, stay alert, and we'll see you in the next one.